What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
The author of the sensational international bestseller and the most compelling non-fiction publication of all time is back in London for the first time in 25 years to celebrate Chariots of the Gods' 50th anniversary. Eric Von Däniken Legacy Night. In this 2-hour special, you are invited to share with Eric his most influential discoveries and revelations. Learn about his incredible life journey as an author and researcher. Meet the team behind the highly anticipated Chariots of the Gods 360-degree entertainment franchise. Eric Von Däniken Legacy Night, live streamed from the Princess Anne Theatre, BAFTA 195, Piccadilly, London, October 15th, 2016.
The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching the UK's only alternative late-night talk show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Larry Holcombe, who was introduced into the world of ufology in the late 1950s after reading 2 of Major Donald Keyhoe's books, Flying Saucers Are Real and Flying Saucers from Outer Space. A year later, after watching Keyhoe debate an air officer on the Old Armstrong Circle Theatre, Larry was convinced the Air Force was covering up knowledge of UFOs. Those events started a 50-year-plus avocation into the study and research of the UFO phenomena. Now in 2006 he took early retirement and started his first novel, The Great River Disclosure, a thriller based on the government cover-up of an extraterrestrial presence visiting Earth, which was released in 2009. He joins me today to discuss his latest book, The Presidents and UFOs, a secret history from FDR to Obama. Larry Holcombe, welcome to the show.
I'm delighted to be here, Kevin. Looking forward to it.
I am so delighted to have you on. Your book is really different in the sense that you're doing it from the presidents, to try to work out what they all knew and the history of what they knew as far as the evidence has led you as well, which is fascinating. Why did you go down this road of looking at the presidents and UFOs?
Well, to be perfectly honest, it was at the suggestion of my agent. I had become fascinated with a filmed or made-for-TV documentary from the 1970s, called UFOs Past, Present, and Future. And I did some background research on it and found out that the co-producer and writer and co-producer, Bob Emenegger, had told a bit of a fascinating story about making this documentary. And to make a long story short, I was speaking at the Roswell UFO Festival that they have every July, and I talked with Stan Friedman, Don Schmidt, a few others about Emenegger, and they gave him a thumbs up as being a straight shooter. So I was able to contact him, and he or made a contact, and he called me back. We ended up talking about 2 hours and developed a relationship, which goes on today. Bob's in his 80s now, but he's still sharp as a tack and has a wonderful sense of humor. But the background of this documentary brought the Nixon administration into it, and Bob was brought in by the committee to reelect the president. Bob had been a fraternity brother of H.R. Bob Haldeman, Nixon's chief of staff, and he was recommended to come in and make a documentary for the committee to reelect the president. Long story, but when Bob got involved in it, he just thought it was going to be a scientific documentary, but he was taken aside and said, "Would you like to make a documentary on UFOs?" And he was stunned. He didn't know anything about UFOs except what he'd seen on tabloids at the grocery stores, and but he and his partner, the film production studio owner, just said, "Yeah, we'll go ahead and make this documentary." And they found out that it appears that Nixon was behind the documentary. I don't want to drag this story out, but Nixon had a close friend with Jackie Gleason, was close friends with Jackie Gleason, who was strongly into ufology. And you have to believe that he bent Nixon's ear to release some government information that the government had on UFOs. So this documentary was made with government approval. Scenes were shot inside the Pentagon with the former head of public information walking the halls of the Pentagon, standing under a photograph or a painting of Hort Vandenberg and explaining the famous estimate of the situation. And you don't get film crews into the Pentagon, especially to do stories on UFOs. So anyway, to make a long story short, I thought was the best documentary I'd ever seen, and it had government support, and I wanted to write it. I wanted to write a book about it. I took it to my agent, sent it to my agent, and he got back to me and he said, "I think it's great. I think could be the nucleus for a book, but I think you need more than that story to make a complete book. Why don't you bring in all the modern presidents?" And he wasn't my agent at the time. I just happened to send this information to him, and he got back to me. And if you know anything about publishing, getting a literary agent is about as difficult as flapping your arms and flying to the moon. So I was very lucky to get him. He sent me an outline on how to write a nonfiction book proposal. I spent about 4 months on that. Ended up being 18,000 words. I gave it back to him. Long story, but St. Martin's ended up buying the idea for the book. Then the monkey was on my back to write the thing. So that's when I started doing research, and that's how the book came about.
Okay, and St. Martin's, they're what publishing house are they?
St. Martin's is a division of Macmillan.
Okay, okay, so it's a division.
So
Yeah, yeah.
they're a major publishing house in New York,
Excellent.
and have been excellent to work with.
Good, good, good. Well, I hear that there's the what would you call it? Probably going to get this wrong, but the rights for a movie have been moved to Sony. Sony brought the rights for the movie.
Sony Television Productions has purchased the rights to the book, and I understand they recently have turned it over to two writers. They were looking for writers, and I understand they found those writers, and they've turned it over to the writers. So yeah, Sony has optioned the book.
That was the word, optioned. Yeah.
It's also it's been sold to a Japanese publisher. That's out. The book is out in Japan, as well as an Italian publisher, and it's out. I think it was released in Italy in December, this past December.
That is so cool, Larry. Well done, man, for that. And I bet when you did the book, it was just out of passion. You never expected it to, to go so quickly.
No, and it's a lot of luck involved. And I happened to find someone that was interested in the subject, in an agent, and so it was a lot of luck, but it was a lot of hard work.
Yeah. Yeah.
To write a book proposal that's 18,000 words when the book itself is a little less than 100,000 words.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work that goes into it, but it certainly has paid off.
Oh yes, and a lot of research. And just very quickly, your interest in UFOs when you were younger as well. Obviously you never had your own UFO experience, did you, as such?
Not until much later.
Oh, you did have a UFO experience.
Yeah, of a sort. Yeah, in the mid 1990s. Yeah, I saw an object in the daytime rise up out of. I lived on a creek off of the Great Wycomico River, which enters into the Chesapeake Bay, where Virginia, where the Potomac River enters into the bay, or just below that, and it was a very wooded area. And as I was sitting in my home office, which my desk had a large picture window that looked out over the creek, which was a tidal saltwater creek. On the opposite shore, I saw an object. Or I saw a couple of birds, very large birds, which I assume were ospreys, were circling over top of this tree. And they caught my attention. Then I noticed a rustling, a very frantic rustling inside of the tree. And your mind's a computer, and it's trying to figure out what you're looking at, what you're seeing. And the only thing that came to mind very quickly in a split second was maybe there's another bird in the top of that tree that's gotten tangled up in fishing line, monofilament, which happens a lot with birds on the bay. And he's caught in the tree. But as this rustling continued for 2 or 3 seconds, I guess, I saw an object rise up out of the top of the tree. And the best description I can give of the thing is it was, if you think of a hot air balloon without a gondola below it, much smaller scale, probably 6 feet, 8 feet across, a little bit higher and a little bit more in height. This thing floated out of the top of the tree. As it went up, it reached the tree line. It was down in the cove. It reached the tree line and started moving, drifting to the right. As I watched it, I could tell it was rotating on a vertical axis. And as I watched it float across the top of the trees, all of a sudden, a brilliant light came off of the object. This happened 2 more times, and that unnerved me. So I ran upstairs to a great room where I had some binoculars. But when I got upstairs and got the binoculars, the object was gone. So I don't know what happened to it. I don't know what it was.
Incredible.
It could have been some experimental
Yes,
craft
it could have been.
out of the Patuxent River Naval Air Station, their test facility, which is only 25 or 30 miles as the crow flies away from us.
Well,
So,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know, but I saw a UFO.
Yeah, and you can't explain it, but at least you've had your own experience. Probably no missing time, as far as you're aware, in that case.
Yeah.
Yeah. No missing time. But yeah, very, very interesting. Okay, so you've always had a keen interest in this. What was your? I mean, I really want to get into the book. Just very briefly. What was your sort of daytime job before doing this book? Before even going back 20 years ago.
I ran a sales agency for commercial construction products. I was a representative, manufacturer's representative for a number of commercial construction products, and then I ended up my career by going with a company out of Chicago to set up a military sales division for this company, which I did, and I retired from that, took early retirement in 2006.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to move this on just a little bit here, but I just wanted to get a bit of a background of yourself. So this is your new incarnation into this work as full-time, absolutely. And I think you've done a really, really good job with this book. Now, we're going to get... Okay, let's just go to Roswell straight away. Now, am I right that Roosevelt was the president when Roswell happened? Or have I got that wrong?
No, it was Truman.
It was Truman, okay. But
Right.
your story, your chapters begin with the beginning of the Roosevelt and Truman administrations. Did Roosevelt know anything about the UFO phenomena?
Well, we have documents that have not been authenticated, but are in the hands of Dr. Bob Wood on the West Coast, who has looked or is looking into these documents in an attempt to authenticate them. And these are documents between Roosevelt and the Chief of Staff of the Army, George C. Marshall, and the documents state one goes into the so-called Battle of Los Angeles in 1942, where Marshall states to Roosevelt that two craft of, and I forget the term that he used, but I liked it very much because it sounded like it was from that era. I think it's something like we've recovered two craft, one in the off of Catalina Island, the Navy recovered it, and one in the San Bernardino Mountains that bears no resemblance to the conventional. And he goes on to say that it appears that these were not of earthly origin or something of that effect. I don't have it in front of me. Get my age, my memory's not all that good. But so you had this correspondence between Marshall and Roosevelt, and there are a number of other documents that Roosevelt is supposed to have written pertaining to other matters involving extraterrestrials.
Okay.
So but you have to remember Roosevelt, even though this would be very important, Roosevelt was consumed with a Great World War.
Yes.
And as important as this is, in one of the documents, he said to Marshall, "You have my assurance that when we are victorious, you will have all of the, I forget what his wording was,
Yeah.
but you will have all the support necessary to investigate and study these vehicles of strange origin," or something like that. I'm not quoting that
No,
accurately,
no,
but
no.
that
But
in
that,
essence
so,
is.
so, so then, with all these presidents leading up to even Obama today, you've had to look for evidence in the form of documentation. Actually, legit documentation in a sense.
I've spent a lot of time in presidential libraries. Um, you're not going to find a smoking gun in a presidential library. What you will find, hopefully, is something that will lead you to a good timeline of events and that will tie things together. Um, um, but you, any any document that would be a smoking gun is still classified above top secret or has been redacted from the files. And I ran across a lot of files um, where documents were redacted, were not in the file.
Right.
Um, and and I must say that the archivists at all of these presidential museums were fantastic in their effort to help me find the information that I wanted. My fear was when I started out that you tell an archivist that I want information on Lyndon Johnson and his experience with UFOs, and they'd laugh you out of court. That wasn't the case at all. They were very helpful and offered suggestions of where some of this information may be. But it's a very tedious job.
Sure.
You're
Oh yeah.
talking about millions of
Of
documents.
course, of course. So prior to Truman, prior to Roosevelt, um, there was no sort of paperwork trail there in a sense for any UFO or cover up or connection. It really started in the Roosevelt era.
Yeah, the first event that I cover in the book was the crash of the reported crash, alleged crash of a UFO in Cape Girardeau, Missouri
Oh
in
yes, yes.
1941.
I had Paul Smith on this week in regards to the Cape Girardeau MO41 crash. Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, and Charlotte Mann, the minister, her grandfather was I think a Baptist minister,
That's right.
and he was called to a crash site of
The
an
farm.
airplane. When
Yep,
he got
yep.
there, it wasn't an airplane. And anyway, Charlotte Mann, that story is covered. But really, the golden years of ufology, if you will, started with the Truman administration, and I think with Roswell.
So let me get this right for the audience. The Truman era was when Roswell happened.
Yes,
Now,
1947.
he must have been a guy that really, out of any presidency, had the biggest impact on the whole UFO pathway and career in a sense for the journey that it took, because this guy set up Majestic 12 after the Roswell crash due to the nature of what had been discovered and what had been recovered.
That's correct. That's correct. And Truman, there were so many UFO events that were being publicized in the papers, front page stories on flying saucers, as they were known at that time. And by the way, which is the term I still like to use, I think UFOs is all inclusive, and I think flying saucers really
There's a consciousness to it. There's a
takes
control behind it.
takes it and puts it in proper perspective.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, there were so many events that happened. There were so many sightings in New Mexico when they were doing atomic tests, when they were testing rockets, they were testing advanced radars. All of this was going on in New Mexico, and the skies. There are some scientists that have written that they saw so they knew UFOs were going to appear when there was a test, and it got to the point that they really didn't pay any attention to them anymore.
That's crazy.
Uh,
Wow.
so you had that, and then in late right around 1949, 1950 maybe, you had the Farmington Armada, which made headline news, over Farmington, New Mexico, there was the sky was full of flying saucers, and that made headline news. Then you had the Great Washington Merry-Go-Round, so-called Washington Merry-Go-Round, which on 2 weekend nights in July of 1952, the Capitol and the White House and all of the sensitive areas, no-fly zones, were overflown by objects tracked on radar. And interceptors were sent up to chase them down. That made headline news. So Truman had all of this flying saucer business going on while he was dealing with a host of other things, ending the war, authorizing dropping the bombs on Japan, dealing with the Truman Doctrine, the Berlin Airlift. The list goes on, and no biographer ever has mentioned, that I have found, has ever mentioned Truman in connection with the flying saucer issue, which we know he was involved in. He even admitted on tape or on film at a press conference that, yes, that they discussed flying saucers at most every cabinet meeting they had. But you'll find no biographer of Truman that even mentions it. It's a strange thing how the subject is treated.
Completely covered up, in a sense. Some would say it never existed, but that's the great thing about the cover-up. It never existed.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, the thing is, with Majestic 12, and so that I'm with you on this one, because there's a lot we're talking about here. So we're saying Majestic 12 was set up by Truman at the time, with the Roswell incident and the other UFO flap occurring with the testing out in New Mexico and of all these this new technology to us at the time. Do you believe in the Majestic 12, and in the sense that it's a shadow government or organization with some top brass people that were part of this secret circle that were trying to work out what the hell these things were?
I believe that there was Majestic 12. I think Majestic 12 was organized by President Truman through Secretary Forrestal. Had Secretary Forrestal set it up. Whether there is still an organization called Magic or MJ12 or Majestic 12 today, probably not. But that's the organization has probably changed names. It has probably taken in more members, added more members. But I think it exists today, that deep within the government, deep within the black areas of government, I think that there is a group that you can call the Majestic 12 that was their forerunner, and that they exist. And that group is the one that makes decisions on who knows what and how much information is given out to anyone, and what the need to know of people are, such as presidents. And I think in many cases, they feel the presidents don't have a need to know, and they haven't been told.
Well, that's it. When Truman gave this information to this other group, to this, by setting up to Majestic 12, he's almost taken it away from all, future presidents. They have the top secret clearance, but you would probably say that, this clearance is way above top secret.
Oh yeah, there's code words. Most everybody, pilots, all pilots have top secret clearances, and so it's almost, to say you have a top secret clearance is really no big deal. It's when you have a top secret clearance and what the code words that go along with that clearance are. And let me say this about Truman. Truman organized this group, but he made it clear in the writings that I've seen that he wanted the office of the president to control this all of this information. That all of this information would be gathered, but it would be controlled by the president. And after he left office and Eisenhower took over, you had the beginning of the great military-industrial complex. And I think the power was slowly taken away from the executive branch by the intelligence community and the military-industrial complex. And believe me, Kevin, you probably know this too, that military contractors are very well equipped at keeping secrets. If for no other reason, they don't want their competitors to know what they found out.
Absolutely. And just who were some of the more famous people of Majestic 12 as well?
You had 6 top-ranking military officers.
Right.
And 6 highly esteemed scientists.
Okay. Well,
that were part of the original Majestic 12. And I don't know why my mind went blank.
No.
The only one I can think of right now is Donald Menzel, who was a great debunker of UFO.
Absolutely. No, don't even worry. No, it's a bit off topic in a sense, that is. But there you just said there was 6 military-industrial complex. 6 military brass there as well, which is easy to see why it went into the military-industrial complex, as we called it. And this industrial complex, would you say, is part of the military, the Air Force, and the Navy, or is it just the Navy and the Air Force, or?
I think the Navy and the Air Force primarily, and I really believe that the Navy may be more deeply involved in it than the Air Force now.
Isn't that incredible?
I think there are signs that show that the Navy is very deeply involved. One of the other names, one of the more important names of Majestic 12 was General Nathan Twining, who was deeply involved. And we have documentation that he flew to Roswell. He canceled a long-planned trip to Seattle to Boeing to look at some new aircraft and do some hunting and fishing. Stating that something of great national urgency had come up, and we have Stan Friedman found that the pilot and the pilot's log, and the pilot Nathan Twining's pilot flew him to New Mexico around July 8th or 9th. Of 1947, where he stayed there for 4 days, I think it was, before flying back. So it's not a smoking gun, but it certainly fits.
Absolutely. And do you believe that the CIA, and even let's include the FBI in this, know more than what the presidents that we're going to discuss further would have known about the UFO history? Or...
I think it's quite likely that within the CIA, deep within the CIA, there are people that know at least part of the story. Um, uh, Intelligence is so compartmentalized that it's probably very, very few people, if any, that know the whole story.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would certainly think that the within the intelligence community, the CIA would be a player. The FBI also. The FBI has complained that the military grabbed crashed saucers and wouldn't let them see that there's a memo from J. Edgar Hoover to that effect. So I would think it is within the CIA, but still, I think the military is really the controlling body.
Yes.
The Air Force and the Navy.
So let's just very quickly. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. Let's just very quickly move on to Eisenhower, and then we'll get on to JFK. With Eisenhower, though, there was always the rumor that Eisenhower had the chance to have an agreed connection. Contact, a sort of first contact with with the same race that was potentially linked to the Roswell incident. Now, whether this is true or not, what's your evidence showing in this case?
There are at least two stories that involve Eisenhower and flying saucers and extraterrestrials. The first story, I think, was without having the dates in front of me, I think it was 1954 that Eisenhower was supposed to have been vacationing, or not supposed to. He was vacationing in Palm Springs, and his press secretary Haggerty told the press that Eisenhower had chipped a tooth and had to have some emergency dental work done in the middle of the night. Well, the story goes on to say that the president was out of the public view for about 8 or 10 hours, and that he didn't chip a tooth. He was whisked off to Muroc, which was later Edwards Air Force Base. But he was whisked off there to have a meeting with extraterrestrials. And he was next seen, he wasn't seen from 8 o'clock that night until he appeared in church the next morning at 9 o'clock. I don't buy that story, and I state that in the book, simply because, first of all, there's nothing unusual about not seeing a president from 8 o'clock at night until 9 o'clock the next morning. My God, they don't have cameras in his bedroom. So I find nothing unusual about that. And I just don't think the story has any traction. Now, the second story is, I think in 1955, February of 1955, if I have my dates correct, he went on a hunting vacation, took Mamie's mother, and went down to a lodge, hunting lodge, private lodge, owned by his Secretary of the Treasury, I believe, and was going to hunt birds there for a few days. Well, Haggerty came out. He flew in that evening, that afternoon, went out, they did a little bird hunting. The next day, Haggerty said the president has come down with the sniffles, and he'll be staying inside for a couple of days to recover, because he and sitting around with Mamie and her mother playing Scrabble and drinking hot toddies, I guess. But there is solid evidence in this case that that day he was seen later that day at Air Force Base. My memory is getting awful. In New Mexico, Air Force.
Oh, yeah,
Base
yeah.
in New Mexico,
Yep.
which is on the tip of my tongue.
Don't
but
worry.
anyway,
It's cool.
there are three witnesses that we have found, or that say that they saw Eisenhower there. And one witness told a story to his daughter, and they used to call it the fireman story. He was an electrician, and he was running replacing old electrical wiring on poles on the flight line. And he saw Eisenhower's Constellation come in and land on the runway and turn around and stop on the runway. Then he saw a bunch of men below him start running toward the buildings, running away from the flight line. And he turned around. He said he had his back to the sun, and he had to turn around to look because you always climb with back to the sun. And here was something that appeared to be two pie pans put together that was sort of floating along, wobbling, coming toward him on the pole. And he said he cut out of the pole as quickly as he could, right down to the bottom, and he took off running himself. He stopped one time, turned around and looked, and this object had stopped moving and was hovering and just sort of wobbling. They ran on into the building, and all of his buddies laughed at him and said, "You came down that pole faster than the fireman." And so they all called it the fireman story. He didn't put two and two together as that being a flying saucer until much later, when he heard stories in his later life. But I think that story is true. Now, there are people that said Eisenhower got out of his plane and walked across the runway, and there was a UFO hovering or sitting on the ground, and one hovering above it. And Eisenhower went into this UFO and had a conference for about 45 minutes and came back out. Well, I don't doubt that Eisenhower was there, and I don't doubt the story of this lineman. But I don't think that the Secret Service would allow the President of the United States to walk out of his airplane across the runway and get into a alien spacecraft.
No, not at all.
Could have snapped the door shut on him and take him off to
No.
God knows where.
It's almost like there's misinformation with accurate information. It's almost like, you've got to, it's purposefully done like that to, for those who are really looking to see the truth in there, basically, take the good stuff out and leave the bad stuff in. No, there's no way he would have gone into a craft. I can't see that.
Maybe he might have sent his vice president, Richard Nixon, over to do that.
He may have, yeah. Well, he was just the man for that. Nixon was, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's that story in a sense.
I buy into that story, and I think that story has some traction to it. Eisenhower may have met with extraterrestrials, or he may have gone there to view craft that we had built, alien craft that were being flown by our own people.
Which sounds that sounds right.
Or a craft that had been back engineered from alien technology.
Yeah, yeah.
I think any of those are conceivable.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. So if we were to move on from Eisenhower, would you say that's the biggest part of this story, basically?
Yeah, I think so. There are some other Eisenhower stories. I
We're
have received some
yeah.
email from people that have been critical of me for not including a story that was supposed to have been in the New York Post in 1997, June 18th, 1997, that told of Eisenhower being taken to a NATO exercise. He was on the staying on the aircraft carrier Franklin D. Roosevelt, and that night when he went looking for a cup of coffee, he saw some officers and sailors standing on the bridge observing a huge UFO. Um, I didn't include the story. They sort of people have taken me to task for not including that story. I didn't include it because I don't believe it.
Right.
First of all, it was supposed the NATO exercise was called Project Mainbrace. That occurred in September of 1952. Eisenhower was still running for president in September of 1952. He wasn't even president elect, and that was 3 weeks before the election. He wouldn't be out on an aircraft carrier watching a NATO exercise. He'd be back in the United States campaigning. Um, so he wasn't president. I contacted the Washington Post, and a young lady in their archives, spent some time looking at microfilm of the New York Post, and she said there's no such article. I gave her the dates, and she did the research, said there's no such article. So that didn't occur.
Okay, okay. Well, thank you for just mentioning that as well, because like you say, because some people have come back to comment on that basically. All right. Well, let's just move to JFK as well. What did you discover about JFK? And let's try to keep it not too brief, but not let's try to narrow this down a little bit.
It was a very difficult chapter to write. Personally, I didn't want to get involved in the controversy, the assassination controversy, but there are
No, of
documents
course not.
that exist. Whether they're factual documents or not, I can't attest to that, but there are documents exist. One is the famous Byrne memo, supposedly from the director of CIA, um, to make it very short, authorizing the assassination of Kennedy because he wanted all space secrets from NASA to be shared with the Russians, and he wanted all of our UFO, flying saucer UFO data shared with the Russians. And the intelligence community did not like that at all. Now, that's a real quick summary.
Where is that document? Do you have that document, or is that?
I have a copy of it.
And where is that from? That document?
It is in the hands of Dr. Robert Wood in California, who is Dr. Robert Wood is a retired executive from McDonnell Douglas that did some UFO research for McDonnell Douglas, and when he retired, fascinated by the subject, and he has taken up the cause of taking these documents, using forensic methods and what have you to authenticate them. So this original copy is in his hands. I have a copy also in my file. As a matter of fact, it's in the book.
Yes.
It's the Byrne memo, a copy of the Byrne. Very hard to read, but it's in the book.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And what else did you find out about JFK as well?
There is basically the whole chapter on JFK is built around his desire to release this
Yeah.
information.
Yeah.
And of course, he only served for 3 years, before he was assassinated. So that's really the long. I mean, the short version of it.
Sure. Not an easy chapter to do, I bet. I bet it wasn't.
No. Like I say, I just as soon stayed away from it. But when you have these documents that exist, whether they are authentic or forgeries or phony, you've got to discuss them. You've got to put it. I just put it out there. I tell the whole story, and then I say, folks, here are the facts.
Yep.
These are the people involved. James Jesus Angleton, who was head of counterintelligence for the CIA, would have been involved. A number of people.
Sure.
And I list all of these, and I say, here's the Byrne memo. If you can connect the dots, fine. But this is the data. You draw your own conclusions from all of these facts.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, moving on then, the Johnson administration, obviously President Johnson led after JFK. What did Johnson's involvement in the space race, or in the sense of the UFO phenomena, what evidence did you find? Well,
Johnson was under tremendous pressure from two sources, from Donald Kehoe, for one, and James E. McDonald. Dr. James E. McDonald, a famous atmospheric physicist from the University of Arizona, who was really beating on the government to release information on what the government had. And Johnson became so bothered by this, he had his Vice President Humphrey's science advisor convene a panel. Kelly Johnson was one of them, one of the people on the panel. Several notable people were on this panel to find out what the UFO story was and write a report and give the report to him. Now, we've never found that report. Art Lundahl, the photo interpretation guru in Washington at that time, who became very close to Kennedy, and who was involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis, deciphering the photographs from the U-2s during the Cuban Missile Crisis, became very close to Kennedy. Art Lundahl was also on this panel to give Johnson information on flying saucers. Unfortunately, we've never found that report, and so we assume it was done. We know that it was requested by Johnson, and so I feel confident it was done. But if it was, it's still highly classified, and is in the Johnson Library somewhere, probably.
Okay. Well, the next president is very interesting, Nixon. Now, Nixon, there's two things about Nixon: the plan for disclosure and sort of, Nixon and the alien bodies.
Nixon, Kevin, it's hard to think now because Nixon is looked on by so many as a villain. But up until Watergate, Nixon was extremely popular. He was elected by almost a historic landslide. And he had opened relations with communist China, which had been a completely closed country. He had started detente with the Soviet Union. So, and a number of other things. So you can say that Nixon, if he disclosed the existence of an extraterrestrial presence to some degree, would go down. He could see himself going down as a very, very important president with all of these accomplishments. Combine that with the fact that his good friend Jackie Gleason was beating on him to do just such a thing. Um, that's where the this television documentary came about. Once, and what I didn't mention in that is Bob Emenegger told me they were taken to Norton Air Force Base, where they were told in secret in a room that was free of any bugs by the head of Air Force, Paul Shartle, head of Air Force Films, that if they did this documentary, they'd be given 600 feet of UFO landing at an Air Force base in New Mexico for the ending of the documentary. That was rescinded later. After the documentary was set up, people were hired. Rod Serling was going to be the narrator, and people. So it was a pretty big budget project. The use of the film was denied them, and the reason was Watergate had come about, and Nixon felt that getting into the disclosure of an extraterrestrial presence would not help his reelection efforts, but possibly hurt them. So, unfortunately, if it had not been for Watergate, we may be living in a different world. But no question that Nixon was fascinated by the subject.
Yeah,
And then you got the story of Nixon taking Gleason to Homestead Air Force Base
that's right.
to view bodies of extraterrestrials and crashed saucers. That was reported by Gleason's ex-wife, who was going to write a book on Gleason, and she included that in there, that he came home one night very upset after he had seen all of these alien bodies and alien craft, and was quite upset, and so that comes from her. So it's a fascinating story. Could she have made it up? Sure, anything's possible, and it does seem a little far fetched, but it does have a legitimate source behind it.
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely. Now, I know that times is not on our side right now, so I'm going to sort of jump forward from the Ford and Carter administrations. I know there is some good stories in there in the Ford and Carter, but I'm going to go straight to Ronald Reagan, because this guy. I remember the speech that he gave to I think it was to the UN. That famous speech he gave. But there is a chapter in your book, in the Reagan, where we talk about the caretaker. He knew this chap called the caretaker.
Right.
Okay.
Again, I tell the story because it's out there. Whether it's factual or not, what does interest me about it is it does have a Reagan-esque tone to it. To Reagan's reply to this caretaker person with the CIA, who was supposed to be the person that within the CIA that handled this very sensitive information. Reagan did have two sightings of UFOs, one on the ground when he was on the way to a cocktail party, And this was reported by Lucille Ball and Steve Allen, are two that come to mind that were at this cocktail party that said Reagan and Nancy showed up, and they're very, very shaken that they saw this craft sitting on the ground in the roadway, blocking their car in the roadway. Before that, Reagan had a sighting from a corporate private jet where he was flying from one place in California to another when he was running for governor. And one of the interesting sidelights to that is that his pilot someone talked to the pilot, his pilot, some years later and said, "Do you think that Reagan really believed in UFOs?" And the pilot said, "After what we saw that night, how could he not?" So, and it has been said that Reagan's advisors had a hard time keeping the lid on Reagan. That Reagan was really fascinated by this stuff, and I think that Reagan was one of the presidents that would have been looked on fondly by the keepers of the secret, if you will, and possibly briefed far more than other presidents. But there's no question he was very very interested in the subject.
Isn't it incredible that these presidents, they've got the nuclear launch capability with their, with them at all times, yet they don't have the clearance, the top level clearance for
Right.
for this information. They
That's
can
it.
launch World War III, but you're not getting to know about the alien connection. It's incredible, isn't it?
Well, I have a good friend that's a retired bird colonel in the Air Force. He's now has done lobbying work in D.C., and he had a lot of friends, a number of Air Force generals that he was very close to. They came up together. They went on to make general and moved up the ladder. I don't know why John didn't, I don't know, but he knew these people. And when I was writing the book, he contacted several of them. One was a 4-star, was a 2 or 3 stars, and a 2-star. And he asked them all if they would be interested in talking with me to give me some information. And they said, all but one said, "Sure, well, I don't mind. We don't mind doing it, but we don't know anything." Or each one said, "I don't know anything. I'm." One of them said, "I'm fascinated by the subject, but I really don't have any inside information." The one general that was a 2-star that didn't want any parts of talking to me whatsoever at all happened to hold a very high position, had held a very high position with the North American Air Defense Command, who keeps track of everything that's in the sky. So you can understand why he didn't want to talk to me. So yeah, it makes no difference how many stars you got on your shoulder.
Right.
If you're sitting in the office of the president, you got to have a need to know, and the people that have the knowledge have got to believe that you have the need to know.
Yeah, it's so well protected. It's very, very clever what they've done.
I don't know how much time we have
A
left.
little bit more.
I have one story that
Of course,
I'd like
yeah,
to pass
please.
on.
Yeah.
When I first got interested in UFOs was in 1960 after reading Donald Keyhoe's books, Flying Saucers from Outer Space and Flying Saucers Are Real. And I developed a real passion. And then I saw him on the Armstrong Circle Theater when his sound was cut off. Keyhoe's sound was cut off when he didn't follow the Air Force script that was brought in. So I knew that the Air Force was covering up, that there was a cover up going on. I had a friend that was about 15 years my senior. When I was a junior in high school, he was probably in his early 30s, and he'd been a judo instructor at Biggs Air Force Base in Texas, in El Paso. Well, he had grown up on a tobacco farm in Southside Virginia, and he was a character sort of like the old Andy Griffith character on No Time for Sergeants. But he had been a judo instructor in the Air Force. I've checked that out, and I was hesitant to tell him my interest in UFOs. Flying saucers, because I'm sure he said, "Oh, you silly kid, you don't believe in that junk, do you?" But I steel myself when I did mention it to him. And he looked at me and he said, "Larry, it's all true." And I was really taken back. What do you mean? He said, "When I was instructing pilots in Biggs Air Force Base, we had pilots that came in from surrounding bases, and one was Roswell. And they told stories of having encounters with UFOs that scared the hell out of them." And he said these were brave pilots. These pilots, some of these guys flew both in the Second World War and Korea. And to see how shaken up they were by this UFO issue. And he said one bomber pilot, which I've often wondered if it was Pappy Henderson, one bomber pilot told him of flying alien bodies and crashed material from a saucer to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, this was in 1960, Kevin, and the point here is nobody knew. In fact, I forgot. I couldn't remember why I knew Roswell was so important to the UFO story. I had blanked what this fellow Doug Locke had told me. I'd blanked it out. But when the story Roswell broke in 1980, I knew that Roswell was very important. Again, I couldn't figure out why. Slowly, the fog started to lift, and I remembered the stories that Doug Locke told me. The importance is not that I knew about it 20 years before anybody else did, but because here was a man in 1960 that told me stories about UFOs in Roswell that fits perfectly into the puzzle, the whole UFO puzzle. And he told that to me in 1960. So for him to tell me, fabricate a story that came up that matches perfectly a story that broke in 1980 is well, it's just too much coincidence.
It is, and you're right, Force Air Patterson Base, if I've got the name right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had other stories, people come on my show in regards to that. There was a story which you probably heard of, the June Crane story, where she worked at that base, and yes, she did get to see things that she shouldn't have, and the recovered bodies from Roswell did end up going there as well. So from other sources have said that as well, from other researchers. It's we're going to get on to some other presidents. I'm going to wrap this up, but the whole disclosure thing, I don't know. I always think about this, right? Are we ready for it? Well, I think, as our understanding of science has come on so much, and we see the possibilities of maybe multiverses and the possibility of an infinite universe potentially. Mm-hmm. Potentially, I mean, and then if that is a theory, and then to get your head around infiniteness, you can't be so silly to think that we are the only life in the universe that's got this far in our technology and our evolution. It can't be just us in an infinite universe. It makes more than no sense. It's the odds are too in favor of life being out there like us. And if it is like us, then what if it was just 1,000 years ahead of us? Imagine that. It would be like a god.
1,000 years? That's right. Think of where we've come in the last 100 years.
100.
So where would we be but you could have someone that's 100,000 years or 1,000,000 years more advanced.
God, can you imagine it?
Well, you would certainly think that if they had been watching the development of life on this planet, and I have certain feelings about that. But if they had been watching the development of life on this planet, when we started setting off nuclear weapons and sending rockets into space,
The kids have got matches.
you can certainly believe that they would want to be where the action was, just to see what the kids down here on Earth were doing
Yeah,
and
well,
how it could affect them.
yeah. I mean, there are those that say the ramifications of nuclear testing has far-reaching effects into outer space than we even understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I completely agree with you. But just go back to hundreds and hundreds of years where people would would think that hundreds of years ago, even further back than that, sorry, but when the world is flat, idea, and how they would just get so angry and want to kill people to go against that, so that the Earth is the center of the galaxy, of our solar system, sorry. Yet we still have that stupidity nowadays to think that we're the only intelligent, life forms out there. So would disclosure ever happen in our lifetime with stupidity like that? Maybe not.
I don't think that it will happen willingly. I think it's going to be, if it happens, it's going to be forced on the government because of events that they can't control. The landing of an alien craft, for instance. But no, I don't think that the government, my acquaintance Stephen Bassett with the Disclosure Project,
He's a nice guy, yeah.
believes that it's going to happen. But I can't agree with him, because first of all, the government or a president would have nothing to gain and a great deal to lose, potentially.
The lies, yeah.
There's no question that laws have been broken, and crimes committed, to the level perhaps of even murder. We know pretty much for a fact that in the earlier days, people that had witnessed these events like Roswell and other things were really browbeat by the military and by government brass. So yeah, I think that those people are probably gone now, but still the ramifications of the government concealing these and being behind shall we say, dirty tricks,
Yes.
Would be very bad.
Yes, absolutely. Now,
for the government.
I know we've kind of missed it. We're going to probably miss out George Bush and potentially the Clinton administration, because we'll get to Clinton through Hillary in just a moment. But Obama and disclosure, it never happened with his presidency.
In the book, I wrote that I really didn't think Obama knew anything about it, or really cared to know anything about it. He has since made comments, and you write a book, and you put certain things in the book, and then events change. So when I didn't think Obama was involved, I couldn't find anything to show that Obama cared anything about the subject at all. Then he comes out and makes the comments that he made on the Jimmy Kimmel show and some other interview shows.
Yes, he did. Ellen, I think, as well. Ellen as well, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the comments was, they won't let us talk about that. When asked about UFOs, said they won't let us talk about that, and laughed. But it was sort of I watched it, and I'm no psychoanalyst, but it was sort of a strange laugh. And he may very well have been telling the truth. So he may know more than I thought he did. You mentioned Bill Clinton, Bill and Hillary. They were involved with Lawrence Rockefeller. My take on the Rockefeller initiative is that Clinton was really going along with Rockefeller because Rockefeller was a very, very wealthy man and very important to Clinton. But I don't think that Clinton was really going to get too deeply involved with Lawrence Rockefeller simply because of how it made him look. We've had four presidents that I can think of that before they got into office said they're going to release all the files on UFOs, and then when they get into office, you don't hear a damn thing from them.
Yeah.
That's strange, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Something's happening.
Well, I think, was it again on the Jimmy Kimmel show? It could have been that Hillary. I will play the clip now. That Hillary was asked about to look into UFOs, and she said, "Yeah, that's one of the things I do want to look into." Have you seen that clip?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
right.
we'll just play that now on the
Husband,
video.
President Clinton, on
We're
this
just
show,
playing it.
He said, I asked him about UFOs in Area 51, and if he looked in, because if I was president, that's the first thing I do. I go right into those files and see
Right.
what was going on.
Right.
And he said that he did do that.
Yes.
And that he didn't find anything.
Well,
Oh.
I'm gonna do it again.
Yeah, why not?
Right? And there's a new name. It's unexplained aerial phenomenon.
Unexplained aerial phenomenon, really?
Yep, UAP. That's the latest nomenclature.
I like the old one. I like UFO. I don't know why.
Well, I think we can use them interchangeably, but I would like us to go into those files and hopefully make as much of that public as possible. If there's nothing there, let's tell people there's nothing there.
What if there is something there?
Well, if there is something there, unless it's a threat to national security, I think we ought to share it with the public.
Well, what if everybody's all hopped up on medical marijuana and everybody gets paranoid? I would love it.
That's why I want more research.
If you share it with me, I'll decide what is the best course of action. I really have my ear to the ground.
Well, I'm more than happy to do that.
So there's that clip. We've just watched that, and Well, what do you take on that? I mean, is she going to be stopped just as Obama? Probably so. Would you say?
That would be my belief.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're going to give, if Hillary is elected president, I don't think that she's going to get the inside information. I don't think she has the need to know.
No.
I don't think with the people that count, has the need to know. And if she says she's going to do it, that may really throw up a red flag and block her from getting anything. Bill Clinton's Webb Hubbell said that Bill Clinton told him the two things he wanted him to do was find out who killed JFK and what the government knew about UFOs. And he said the government wouldn't give him the information. It was,
and
he just wouldn't give it to him.
And then Monica Lewinsky happened then as well. So he was, he was soon, out of the White House when that occurred, and probably would have never had the chance after that to look into getting a firm answer on it. But we've gone through a lot here, and okay, some of the presidents we've not touched, but I really, really, really appreciate you giving us this extended time with yourself. It's fascinating what you've done, and I can see why Sony Television, would want to turn this into some sort of movie or TV show or TV movie. What would you say then is the most important message of your work?
The thing that I really aimed the book at, Kevin, was, and I mentioned this in the book, that there's a group of people that I call the casual observer, the person that has an interest in the UFO issue, but really hasn't taken the time to study it or know the background. And what I tried to do was to aim the book at these people and show them that the government has been very involved in the flying saucer UFO issue going back for 47, and how there were opposing forces within the Air Force, people that thought that they had done the research and thought that they were dealing with an extraterrestrial presence. Others in the Air Force who had not done any research stuck by the fact that they thought that everything was every example was had a prosaic answer, and show these people what really went on inside the Air Force through these golden years. And the second thing, how the power was taken away from the presidency and into the hands of the intelligence community and the military industrial complex, where it remains today. And hopefully show them, the people that say the government can't keep secrets, is simply not true. The government can't keep political secrets, probably.
Well, that's right.
But matters of national security, they can keep. They are very, very well equipped and accustomed to keeping those secrets.
Yes, absolutely. And there was Snowden, who some say, when he took his files with him and downloaded the information he did from that there was some UFO information in there as well. But whether that's true or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. That I have mixed feelings about Snowden, but whether there was any UFO information in that data or not, I don't know.
No. I just thought I'd chuck that in there because sometimes I see posts come up on Facebook about Snowden's going to reveal the UFO secrets and all this. I'm like, well, he hasn't done yet, and was that really what he was looking for? Probably not.
Who was the name escapes me?
Gary
the
McKinnock.
hacker from the UK.
Gary McKinnock.
Yes. I think he may have some data.
It's possible. I mean, his case in the end, he was not. It was overturned, and he wasn't going to be forcibly, extradited to the USA. So it's all gone calm for him now, and I think the case is over. But they did destroy his life so far from all those years of not. He couldn't leave his house. He was imprisoned in his house, basically under house arrest. So that was why the US the US might all the way across the Atlantic. So and from reading your book as well, this is just US presidents. I wonder what about other what were these secrets shared internationally? This UFO phenomena is not just a US phenomena. This is a global phenomena, and surely that involves global presidencies or global leaders involved in this.
Well, that's exactly right. And what I tried to show, the casual observer, is that this is a huge story that has all sorts of roots and branches that run all sorts of ways. I mean, you've got alien abduction. You've got the while the press won't report on UFO issues, while they make fun of it, is the government behind that. Issues that run in all sorts of directions, and it is a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, you got Rendlesham Forest. My tongue hung up there in the UK. That is that Nick Pope has done a great deal of work on. But the Russians have released a great deal of information. They've become very open with some of their people, and allowing some of their officials to speak quite openly about events in Russia. So it's a worldwide phenomenon. It's been going on. Personally, I think it goes back to biblical times and maybe before. But
I think you're right.
I'm only concerned.
Well, from the people that I've spoken to and the Anunnaki, this race that came here as well, that Zechariah Stitchin talked about from the Sumerian clay tablets. It's possible.
Yeah,
it's possible. Yeah. Well, I would just like to say, Larry Holcombe, thank you so much for joining us today. You've been such a star, and I really appreciate someone of your caliber coming on. Thank you so much.
I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, Kevin. Anytime. It's been fun.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on our past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.